As you're entering in, if you would drop your name, location, position, let us know where you're joining us from this afternoon. See some familiar faces. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started here in a few moments. Afternoon, Ann, one of my colleagues joining me from Polk Middle. Thank you, Julie. Pitt County, Ashley. Good afternoon, Sarah from Robeson. Got Rocky Mount, another fellow Polk Countyan. Thank you for joining us. Onslow County. So from mountains to the sea today. Thank you for joining us. We've got someone from near my hometown, Winston-Salem. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Eric, I have 501. You ready for me to start
Awesome. Yeah,
introductions?
sure. And if anybody else jumps in. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Carrie, and then I'll start when you go
Thanks.
over your intro.
Well, welcome everyone to Not Your Average PD. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm Carrie Horton. I'm the program manager for the Keenan Fellows Program for Teacher Leadership. We are a nonprofit organization based out of NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, and have been investing in educators across the state of North Carolina for 25 years. We have over 600 alumni who are amazing educators with a multitude of talents. And Not Your Average PD is just one of the ways we're tapping into this amazing talent to bring professional development to educators by educators. If you want to learn more about our programming, you can visit our website at www.keenanfellows.org. I'm also going to paste that in the chat so that you guys can click on it if you need to. Tonight, we have an amazing Keenan Fellow alumni, Eric Eaton, who is a 32-year veteran middle school teacher. Currently, he teaches 8th grade social studies at Polk County Middle School in our beautiful mountains of Western North Carolina. Eric is a 2023-2024 Keenan Fellow, a North Carolina Teaching Fellow, as well as a National Board Certified Teacher in early adolescent social studies and history. Eric loves to integrate hands-on learning, outdoor learning, the arts, and STEM with his passion for history. And yes, mustache is real. I'm lucky to call him a colleague and a friend, and we are honored that he is with us here tonight to share his expertise on the curious case of the PBL. So welcome, Eric. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie, and I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. I know this is a busy time of year for everybody, and if you're like me, things are starting to hit that final few weeks of school. So I just am pleased that you all took your time from your busy schedules to join us. And I want to thank all of the fine folks at the Keenan Fellows Program for Teacher Leadership for putting this all together and supporting the teachers across North Carolina. So if you're just joining us, if you haven't dropped your name, location, what you teach or in what role you play, just please do that in the chat. And I want to thank everybody from the mountains to the coast. I see counties all over the place. So, Piedmont, coast, mountains, thank you. So tonight or this afternoon, I want to share with you kind of my perspective of how I use project-based learning in the social studies classroom. If you're not a social studies teacher, don't worry. I'm sure there's some things that you can glean from what I'm going to share with you tonight about how I use project-based learning in my classroom and how I integrate different aspects and bring in arts and sciences into some of the project-based learning that I use in my class. So, a little mystery in here. I'm a mystery buff. And I want you to just tell me your experience with project-based learning in the chat from number 1 kind of like the Inspector Clouseau, not familiar or never used, or on over to Hercule Poirot from the famed Agatha Christie stories, being the expert. And no, I didn't model my mustache for him, but he's got a pretty darn good mustache there. So, how do you feel about PBL, your familiarity? So, great. I'm getting a range from twos, threes, sevens. Awesome. So, yeah, got some fours. So, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not a guru or expert in PBL. If I put myself on that scale, I'm going to put myself more as a maybe a six, as I'm continuing to learn and apply and reflect and develop my PBL lessons in my classroom to mesh with my standards and uh, try to find novel approaches to use PBL in the classroom. So tonight we're going to divide our time into kind of two parts. I have part one being to just learn the unique approach that I use to start a project-based learning unit that I gained from Dr. Megan Kaiser, who I believe now is with UNC Asheville. Um, that I've taken her idea that she shared with me and have integrated it into my classroom and expanded upon it to get students to think deeper and to really pique their curiosity on the different topics that we are covering in the classroom. So I want to also help you gain some ideas of integrating arts and humanities with STEM, as I mentioned earlier. Second part of our presentation tonight is the aspect of project-based learning and creating driving questions, the questions that do just that. They drive your overall project as you go through and really help students maneuver and get through all the ins and outs of project-based learning to have a richer experience and show growth and learning in the end. And I just hope you leave this with grown confidence and curiosity about using project-based learning in your class setting. So let's start with part one. Little Inspector Gadget here, using a mystery table to introduce project-based learning. What I want to start off with, we're going to experiment here. We're going to use a Padlet. And I believe Carrie is going to drop that link into our comments here in just a moment. And before we dive into the mystery table method of starting a PBL unit, I want you to share with me how do you currently start a unit of study or a PBL? I know that some of you aren't very familiar with PBL or not as confident. So if you start a unit of study of any kind, if you don't use a PBL, share how you typically begin any unit of study. If you could share those with me. And if you're having trouble with that, if this is not working for you, if you just want to put it in the chat. Oh, I see some people on there. Awesome. So an entry event. I'm seeing in the chat using KWL strategies. Of course, the important vocabulary. Intro slides, sharing prior knowledge. So a variety of methods to kick these off. So yeah, tapping that prior knowledge is very important to see what they know and what they don't know about the topic. Uh, Phenomena or hook, a story. It's a great way to start us off. Something related to or grabs student interest and poses a large picture question. All wonderful ways to get students engaged and connected to the learning. So you can continue to share, and this helps me to improve and learn ideas. So you can continue to share in the chat or on this Padlet. And there are going to be a couple more Padlets I would like for you to go through. So, what is a mystery table? This is a method that I have used for a few years to introduce a unit of study, a PBL unit of study, but it can actually be used for something that is not so formal as a PBL. And basically, it's all in the word, mystery table. And so I want to share with you, first of all, what a mystery table is, and then we're going to see some tables, and I'm actually going to have the group look at a mystery table. I wish you could be here and we could set up the table, but we're just going to have to do it by pictures and get you to interact with some of the objects on there virtually. So basically, a mystery table is a table filled with seemingly unrelated, but as a teacher, they're connected objects. They have some connection to the topic and the theme for the unit that you are going to be doing. And this will make a little bit better sense when I show you some of the items as an example. The items, I would encourage you to collect tactile objects, video clips, even audio clips, music that students can observe, touch, listen to engage all their senses, but that they are connected to the overall topic with which you are going to be studying. It's used as an introductory activity, but there's going to be another element that I'll talk to you in just a little bit called a mystery note catcher. So you're going to not only have students look at these objects, they're going to record their thoughts and start developing their ideas of maybe what is the topic going to be of this unit and where are we going with this? How are all of these things connected together? You know it, but the students don't know it yet, and you can just see their brains working in that gray matter, making those connections as you go through. The ultimate end of this is that they start developing their driving question for the unit if you're doing PBL, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So overall, you're stimulating observation skills and questioning for the student. So let's look at an example of mystery table. So hopefully on your screen, you can see an example of a mystery table that I use with students, and the items range from maps. I've got maps of Egypt, Africa, Gee's Bend, Alabama, Italy, France, Appalachia. I have thread, needles, scrap cloth, pictures of various items. So you don't have to feel like you've got to go out and get a bunch of stuff. You can have images as well. But I have varying pictures of bees, bears, leaves, all kinds of things. I have samples of cotton, paintbrushes, even have a song clue, and then books related to the topic. You don't want to be obvious, but there are some things out there that if they pick up the book and look through, it might give them a clue as to where you're going with this. So anybody want to throw in a guess in the chat as to maybe what the topic of this particular mystery table, where we're going with that? So if you can, a couple of you could drop in your ideas in the chat. right? So art. Any other guesses? History of cloth and trade. Like those answers. Any other guesses before we move on? Textiles. All on the right path. Right, so I'm going to go to the next screen, and so I'm going to reveal what my PBL project topic is. So I developed this project around quilting and the history of quilting and how quilting can really tell the history and change of people over time. And so I titled my unit Quilting Carolina. We're going to talk about driving question development in a little bit, but the driving question that emerged out of this unit is, how does quilting show us history and change in people over time? As a PBL, one of the main aspects is that you are giving students, developing students agency to research and kind of be guided with that driving question, that in the end you're going to produce some type of product, and the students are going to produce some type of product, some culminating activity. And that's where, through their research and through that culminating activity, you can integrate things such as the arts and math. And in this particular unit that I am creating or doing, I'm bringing in the visual arts. And with the quilting aspect, I'm bringing in math, geometry, measuring, and just the overall history. So it's a great way to integrate other areas, even in the social studies classroom. So the culminating activity with this particular unit, once we did the mystery table and they started doing the research, the culminating activity is we created a quilt trail based on their artistic designs of quilt squares. And some of you may be familiar with quilt trails here in Western North Carolina, the barn quilts in other parts of the country. So the students created their own based on designs that inspired them, things around them, just like quilters going back to really ancient times were using. So that's just one example of how I integrate, but also how I kick off a unit with the mystery table. So I'm going to let you try again. But before we get into our next one, here's the element that's important to use with that mystery table. And I believe Carrie is going to link this document for you to use. And in this mystery note catcher, you are going to give these to students to start recording their answers when they come up to the mystery table. And again, to give a shout out to Dr. Megan Kaiser and to give her credit for this note catcher idea. What I have done is taken it to another level in having students to give predictions, topic extensions, and start developing that driving question for the overall unit. So this mystery note catcher, you are going to start off by having students look at the table and just jot down what they noticed, what stands out to them as the objects on the table. But as you've given them time to do that, you're going to go on to encouraging them to start asking questions. Keeping in mind that these objects are connected, they're going to start developing questions. Well, why is cotton connected to a picture of a bear or thread or a map of Africa? And that's going to be the launching point for your discussions about these objects. And then encouraging them, okay, what do you think our topic's going to be? And not only what the topic is going to be, but what do you think we will learn about that topic? Not that we're just learning about animals, but what about animals? So you're getting them to engage into deeper thought, deeper uh, connections to their learning. And then eventually, you're going to start guiding them into developing this guiding, essential, or driving question. Um, I will say, go ahead and say now, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later, is that starting out, if you're doing a PBL and one of these mystery tables for the first time, you're probably going to put a little more guidance into it for students, and the guiding question or driving question that you're going to do, you're going to kind of scaffold that the more and more of these that you do. But I want students to have agency in creating these guiding questions and take ownership in that. And I'm going to share with you here in just a little bit in part two how I go through that process of having students develop these guiding questions. Right. So let's try. This is a toughie. There is a link to, I think, the picture if you want a bigger image of this, or if you're able to enlarge your screen. And you can just do this on a piece of paper, just in your mind, to examine some of the items that you see on our table here. And using this picture, study the objects for a moment and complete your mystery note catcher. I want you to put in items that you notice that stands out to you, and then take a moment to put a few things down of what you wonder about. What questions do you have related to the objects that you're seeing in the picture? So if you take a few moments, and we will come back together and have a little discussion. Again, if you want a larger picture, there is a link in the chat. So for sake of time, to make sure we get to everything, if you will start by just putting some items in the I noticed section. If you can add those to the chat, I'm curious to see what people are noticing about the objects in the image there. You have cotton, cotton farm, denim, pine cone. Connection to slavery. Color blue. Various crops. Y'all are sharp. Now, again, in my classroom, I allow my kids to pick these items up. I encourage them to hold the items in their hand and feel free to examine these things. History of plantation, soil sample. I've got some, I'll go ahead and point out a couple of things. This one is a vial of rice. And then in the other, I have some seeds, special seeds we'll talk about. All right, so how about wonder? What are some questions that you have about these objects? If you would share a couple of those in the chat, maybe what something is or what the connection is. Good question, Sarah. How old are the objects? Or who the person is in the picture and how she is connected. Who is the woman in the picture? The map of Japan. So somebody picked up on the map of Japan. Interesting. Are the items from the same area or time frame? Interesting questions. So I like the thought processes and the learning that is starting to take place here. So I'm going to reveal our topic in just a little bit, but I'm going to let you guess it first. So just in your mind, before we throw anything in the chat, let's think about some predictions. So the extension part of the mystery table, I start having my students think about the topic. But going beyond just what the topic is, what will they learn about that topic? And if you want to be bold and go ahead and put in a driving question, I'm eager to hear what you think the driving questions will be. So take a moment, predict your topic, create an extension, and then develop that driving question. And if someone would like to go ahead and start sharing, we'll see how everybody is thinking about this. And we'll get into driving questions in more detail, how to develop them and guide your students. I just want to note again that after I have students to look at the mystery table, um, we do have class discussion. And just like I'm doing with you, but in the chat boxes, I have them share what they are noticing. And it's really interesting to hear students' reactions when somebody brings something up, to hear another student say, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't look at it that way. And that's really how I know there's some deep thought going on and how they're feeding off of each other and sharing with each other. So go ahead and throw in your predictions, what you think our overall topic is going to be. I don't know if I've got a delay in some of the chats or not, but go ahead and feel free to add those in there. I will say somebody was on the money in some of their questions. Getting agricultural basis for the economy. Interesting. Yes, I love teaching about the connections to agriculture. You're on the right track. I will say that. So Courtney, thanks for that one. Some of you mentioned denim, slavery, the color blue. All of these things have a connection, and that connection has a important legacy, sometimes a painful legacy, and has a great connection, great as in big part, not necessarily positive part to our history in North and South Carolina, especially. Farming leads to innovative tools like clothing. All right, so wide variety of guesses there. So here it is, drum roll. The topic of this particular unit that I do is indigo. And I have students, once they make this guess, then we need to jump into, okay, how can we turn this into a driving question? And so my students begin thinking about what we've been studying for the year in North Carolina history, and then diving deeper into all the aspects of history that we study, economy, social structure, cultural changes. And the driving question that our classes came up with is how can Indigo show the economic, social, and cultural changes in American history? I mean, that's what my students developed. Of course, I'm guiding them and questioning them, but this is what ultimately they came up with. So, student research. See a mistake in my slide there. It says quilting history, but it should be indigo history. Just to highlight a couple of items, like the pine cone. Pine cone, tobacco, rice were the key cash crops in North Carolina and South Carolina early in the colonial period, with naval stores, tobacco and rice in the coastal area. Um, these seeds in one of the vials are actually indigo seeds, which really gets students curious. They don't know exactly what they are, but they know they're seeds of some kind. Images of indigo production, the connections to enslaved people, and then the picture of the lady. This is Eliza Pinckney from South Carolina, who is credited with bringing some of the first profitable indigo crops into South Carolina that launched indigo as a cash crop, number two cash crop in South Carolina during the 1700s. And then I have some examples of indigo dyeing. Somebody mentioned the map of Japan. Indigo really is a worldwide color. There's some fascinating research behind the Japanese use of tie-dye, also West African adire. And then denim, of course, denim's connection to indigo, we think of just as the color, but in my research, denim was actually created as a cloth for enslaved people. So they were actually wearing the color that uh, they were responsible for the economic viability and the use as a cash crop. Cash crop. So there's a rich history, very difficult history, but one that is fascinating. I think students, when they learn about that cultural connection, can really get a broader sense of both the positive aspects, but also behind the story and uh, the cultural connections to this economic connections of slavery in America. So that gives you kind of an idea. Now, after students research, I know we're not trying to solve a life problem like in a STEM related PBL, but again, I connect the art and science. I actually have students dye using natural indigo, and we talk about indigo's scientific properties of oxidation. So we touch in the science, but also in the visual arts with the tie-dye aspects from places like Japan in West Africa and the resist dyeing of the adire from West Africa. So that kind of gives you a little run through. And so to put these all together, here's three examples that I use through integrating humanities, art, and STEM. I shared with you the quilting aspect, indigo, and you can see some examples of student indigo work that they created, integrating the science. And again, I talked about oxidation, plant dyes, talk about mordants, protein versus cellulose fibers. You know, you can go all directions with this while still connecting to the history of indigo. And then, of course, art and the design and meeting and the cultural aspects of design in African cultures and Asian cultures as well. The last example that I've got here is a local history project, and that's going to lead us into our second part of our presentation dealing with driving questions, in which I have created a local history project through a group I'm involved with called Root Ed and Constructive Learning Design. Some of you may be familiar with the work they do. So before we move on, learning check time, just like many of us do in our class. Let's pause just a minute, excuse me, and I want you to share one thing. This is a new Padlet. I think Carrie is going to put the link in the chat over or down at the bottom. Use the Padlet link provided to give me some ideas of what you've learned so far, something that you can pull from this and apply to your classroom situation. So if you could add that information to the Learning Check Padlet, and if you're not able to get through to the link, you can put that in the chat at the bottom. So please share one thing you have learned so far or you feel you can use in your classroom. Is anybody having trouble with the links? Good. Right. Thank you, Ann. Ann is starting a new unit on Monday and is looking for the mystery table as an introduction. Awesome. And the mystery tables are not really difficult to put together. You know, be creative and throw some things in there that students can. This is something that they can pick up and touch. So yeah, it's so many different things you can do with that, encouraging them to touch. I worked in a museum for a while, and we were always telling the visitors, "Don't touch that." But you know, our curiosity gets the best of us sometimes. So
Eric,
put things out there.
there are actually several comments on the Padlet, but I
They're
think,
not showing up.
yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing them. Sorry. Maybe it's because I need to drop this down. I'm going to refresh mine. Sorry, folks. So Julie says integrate in my class versus wait for other teachers to use the same topic. Oh, here we go. I just needed to refresh it. So the mystery table has so many items that students will be able to find a connection to. You can go in so many different directions using seemingly unrelated objects. And that's what really throws students. But sometimes you want to throw them and put that element of surprise and mystery in there to see what their thinking is. So awesome. Glad that is something that you can find useful. And as I say, will it survive the test of Monday morning? When I go to a workshop, is it something I can put in there pretty quickly and use? And don't think you have to use it just for a PBL. It's a great way to kick off any kind of unit of learning. So awesome. Thank you for sharing, everybody. All right, so let's quickly go into part two, the aspect of the driving questions in PBL. So if you're not familiar with PBL, driving questions, just what it says. It's going to drive your unit, but you probably are already using these in your units anyway. You know, what are we trying to learn from all this? You might have heard this as critical questions or essential questions, but I'm going to use the term driving questions as we move through. So just a couple of pointers on driving questions. They're going to help us, of course, dive deeper into our learning and help guide our research. We actually are looking at this as really inquiry. Students are inquiring about, you know, the world around them, the things that we're giving them. And so test out your questions. And I give this to my students too. I teach 8th grade. So I have them to look at what makes a good question, a good driving question. Is it thought-provoking? Is it open-ended? You can't have just a yes or no because we want to dive deeper into it. And of course, that Googleable aspect. You don't want something that they can just Google and get the answer to. Of course, aligning things to our standards is a part of what we are studying. And is it challenging? Is it authentic? Is it something people want or need to know about? Now, some would say my social studies PBLs are not trying to solve a huge life issue or community or social issue, but I say, well, it's something that we want to learn and connect to what we're doing in class and how it applies to the rest of the world. So, in my opinion, my projects are authentic. It's getting them to engage with their learning. So I'm going to use an example that I shared with you earlier, this public history project that I created with the help of a group called Root Ed in constructive learning design. And what I'm showing you is kind of the linear aspect of my PBL project from its introduction to the actual product that students develop. I would encourage you, if you are not familiar with PBL, that kind of the place to go to is pblworks.org. They've got a lot of information there. I refer to it. I'm still learning from them. So any opportunity you have to engage with PBL workshops or these sites like PBL Works is great to get some ideas about how to implement it in the ins and outs, what a PBL is. So again, I'm going to just take you through the project intro for this public history project. And of course, I started off with a mystery table with this public history project. And evidently that is not loading. So I did a history mystery of some local history items. There it goes. Hopefully that's up. Not as involved as some of my others, but these are all things related to my local history, my area, my community's local history. From everything from textiles to indigenous people connections. And this is going to help engage them in kind of thinking about the topic like we talked about earlier. But I want to focus on the driving question aspect of it. So once they have done the mystery table and they actually filled out their guide, I collect their ideas on what their topic and driving questions are going to be. And I will create a Google form and I will put all of their responses down and I will have them to start voting as classes, keeping in mind what makes a good question, a good driving question. And I have them vote on what they feel putting it to the test. Are they Googleable? Are they open-ended? Have them start voting on those driving questions for themselves. And the thing about driving questions that I have just learned is that you don't just start the driving question, set it at the beginning of the unit, and then that's it. You don't revisit it because I think it's important to revisit, but also to refine that driving question that maybe we need to tweak some of the wording to encompass more things. So as we're going along, we will revisit as a class those driving questions and start revising them or adding to them and refining them as it goes along, as the project goes along. So I want to emphasize that creating those driving or essential questions, go back and revisit them with your students and say, are we still on track with this? Do we need to refine it to encompass something else that we have found out through our research? And then I will allow the students to do the research. This unit is an ongoing unit that I have throughout the year with a culminating event at the end to create a public history display. Um, and then here I'm going to show you some of the results. So I take the students' votes, we discuss these things, and come up with a driving question, and even maybe decide that driving question needs to be refined a little bit further. So I just want to make sure that you understand driving questions as you're developing them, uh, that they can be refined and revisited and should be brought up every time students are doing research. And then as they're doing research, we keep track of the research. This is just a picture of kind of a word wall as we're doing the research, things that they're finding, kind of categorizing information on different time periods for this project that we're doing. And in the end product, we are creating public history displays. So we're not trying to solve a major issue, but we are trying to address the fact that our local community doesn't have much about its history for the public to see in the local park. And so to integrate STEM, I had the students as an additional part of this project. They created scale models of the history display that they're going to take the research and that we are going to build and use in the community. So connecting with community, but also adding those math skills and research skills into it. So here are some of the examples of the students' research displays. We had a little issue getting that fully implemented, but hopefully after we can see more recovery from a recent hurricane, then we can actually build that and display that with some help from the community. Before we start wrapping up, though, I want to show you some student samples of what students say about driving questions. And it's really telling. When you get student feedback, you can really see that learning is taking place. And I think students really can be honest with us. So the aspect of driving questions, this really hit home to me, that a student would say that the driving question helped me understand what my project needs to look like and what questions I might need to ask my interviewees. They were interviewing people for their aspect of the project. And then, how did the driving question strategies change your views on the importance of well thought out questions? It helped them understand the importance of well thought out questions. I now know what kind of questions I need to ask to get their final product. So you can see that students are taking it seriously and they're using driving questions as their guide. And one last sample that I'll show you. I just gave them this kind of feedback, and they were explaining to me that the driving question aspect helped their group narrow down their information by having a specific area in question that they use as a guideline. And these are their words. I did not encourage them to write a certain way. I just gave them the question, and this is what they gave me. And using the driving question strategies changed my view or motivation while finding my research, because it was almost a target or goal for the benchmark of my work. Again, their words. And that just kind of, as a teacher, just sends chills up my spine to see students say, these types of things, that they're getting it and it's helping them. So mystery solved, maybe for some of you, a little bit more about PBL. And we're going to start wrapping up here in a little bit. But before you go, I hope that you gleaned something from our short time together, or last, say, 45 or 50 minutes, and that you will take this as kind of an inspiration to find out more about project-based learning and creating driving questions and mystery tables. Our last little part, I want you to share one more time in the Padlet to help me to see what you're doing and maybe what you took away from the session that we have together today. So if you give me one thing that you learned in this session you feel you can use in your class setting. Some of you have already addressed that with the mystery table. And is there any aspect of what I've told you that made you feel more confident or more curious about exploring project-based learning for your class setting? So if you would share those, I think Carrie has put the link up as an exit ticket. So kind of turn the tables now. We as teachers are doing exit tickets. But I'd love to see your feedback.
Eric, there was a question in the chat that
Yes.
while they're kind of sharing that feedback, if you could address the question was, how do you keep core classes from ruining the surprise for other classes when you do like the mystery tables?
Excellent question. I use no threats of coercion in any way, and it's amazing how well they keep the secret. I've not had a problem with that, maybe one or two, but I tell them if you know it, I start my class with if you've already found out, please don't spoil it. And for the most part, they're really honest, and they see some things in the mystery table that even though the person might have told them the topic, they find new things and new connections. So I have a great class this year. There's always the one or two that want to spoil it, but for the most part, they're honest and they are sworn to secrecy. So excellent question. Yeah. Um, for elementary level, probably is easier since you are teaching the same group, but I've got 4 different classes. So it's amazing how the secret doesn't get out there by the time I get to my last class of the day. Great question. Thanks. I see a lot of people saying, yeah, they're getting ready to do it with a novel study. This is an excellent way to kick off a novel study. And then the opportunity to pose driving questions based on the criteria and then edit and refine them. I think that's so important. Again, that's something I've just learned through doing something called micro-credentialing and learning how crafting driving questions is not just an end. It's constantly going as a project-based learning unit is going along. So yeah, I encourage you to revisit those questions with your students and see the importance of refining. It's just like project development in the real world. Real world, you go back and you refine those things as your project as adults or plans as adults are developing. Yeah, Google Forms is a great way to get their feedback if they don't want to share openly. Um, they can share anonymously, and we throw the questions up there and can critique without them. And some are honest and say, "Oh, that's mine," and it was pretty bad. I've had students say that, but I wish I would have said something else. So, it's a learning opportunity. If you can't put it on the Padlet, that's fine. Just share in the chat. All right, so thank you all. I appreciate your time in this busy time of year. I just would like to encourage you to join my colleague Rob Condi coming up on April 22nd from 5 to 6 in his session, Building Student Resilience Through Fables, Connecting with Nature, Community, and Self. And just being a teacher in Western North Carolina, as many of you in experiencing the things we've gone through, and maybe even many of you on the eastern part of the state with storms and things, it's a timely and important topic dealing with resilience of ourselves and of our students. So I encourage you to join us with the next Not Your Average PD and Rob Condi. And Carrie can probably tell you more about the session feedback, but there's a QR code. So Carrie, I'm finished. If there's no other questions, and again, thank you all. So Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you to close. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. As Eric said, I've dropped the link in the chat, or you can use that QR code there to give us your session feedback. We do take feedback very seriously, and we use it to improve our work and make sure that educators are getting what they need from us. That's super important to the work that we do. So please feel free to be honest and share with us what worked and what any ideas that you have, like, to improve our work. We're always happy. And if you have top ideas for other topics to explore with Not Your Average PD, things that you're interested in or that you want to learn more about, please feel free to share those with us too. And that feedback gives you an opportunity to do that in that feedback form. We do hope that you'll join us for the last session for this spring, which is with Rob Condi on April 22nd. As Eric mentioned, it is a timely topic, that building student resilience through fables. The work that he and two of our other fellows, one who is here, and Kelly, shout out, and Betsy Morster have done with their fellowships this year has just been amazing. And we're so happy to have Rob representing them to share his work with us on April 22nd. So if you're able to join us, we'd love to see you there. And I will drop also in the chat the link to our website that has more information about our Not Your Average PD sessions. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and have a great evening. We'll stick around if you have questions.